One person in the world made me feel special, loved, amazing, the most important person in the world in the first 3 minutes I met her. And that's one of my former guests, Sam Horn. I felt cherished by that woman the moment we met. And it's been a while since it's been 59 years since anybody's made me feel that way. And then a few short months later, I met my next guest. And within 3 minutes, I felt loved, cherished, special, valued, amazing. So, of course, I immediately had to have her on the podcast to introduce you to her. I immediately introduced her to Sam because I thought they were kindred spirits, and we are all the better for them. Meredith Bell is the president and co-founder of Grow Strong Leaders. She's the co-author of Connect with Your Team, Mastering the Top 10 Communication Skills with her business partner, Dennis Coates. I've been reading the book last couple of days. So well thought out, so well put together. If you're a new leader, it's a great book for you to really up-level your game in almost no time. She's been an entrepreneur since 1982, and when I read her resume, it just kind of makes me tired. Everything she's accomplished, everything that she's done. She hosts a podcast called The Strong for Performance, and her message is focused on the essential communication skills for the workplace, the benefits of focusing on giving and being of service, and what's required to develop positive habits and skills over time. Meredith's personal value is being committed to serving others so their life is enriched as a result of their encounter. And that's why I started the podcast the way I did. That's how she makes me feel. So now this is how she's going to make you feel. Meredith, thank you for being on the show.
Oh, Mark, thank you for that wonderful introduction. And I am here to serve you and your audience. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
I do these ridiculous introductions because I want people to know the impact of whoever it is I'm talking. I want them to take seriously how I'm moved by someone. I just interviewed Jeff Hoffman, who is the former CEO and founder of Priceline, world famous guy, one of the richest people in the world. But I don't want people to be misled that he's on the show because he's rich and famous. He's the most heart-centered, giving human being. I've like just amazing. So I want people to understand why they're here. You're here because you made me feel something, and then you followed up with service and connections and value, and your communication styles within your writing, within your videos, within your business, which we'll talk about, are second to none. So I thought if you would come on and we could talk about the importance of these communication skills, and then we're going to dip it in your dedication to service.
Great.
So we'll start with what's missing from communication these days. There's a million books, million videos. Everybody knows what's the right thing to do. Why do people need you?
I think a fundamental element is attention. People are missing attending to each other because they're so distracted by their phones, by other things that are going on, and they're preoccupied with themselves too, and the things that are going on in their lives. And so when we look at what's missing, the feeling, and I guess this is why I'm so passionate about being of service, because so many people aren't being recognized for their value as human beings. And there are so many little things that we can do that don't require that much effort, but they do require attention, awareness, noticing. If someone needs to be heard, to be willing to be the kind of listener that really helps them feel heard, to look for opportunities to appreciate other people and what they do, instead of looking out for what they're doing wrong and pointing out where they're falling short. Because I think that all of us, no matter how successful we become, crave appreciation. We like to know we matter. And so I think that's a key element for all communication. If you have the attitude, I want to be here for this person, I want to be fully present for them in this moment, whatever they want to talk to me about, whatever we need to discuss, I want to be here for them.
That sounds really wonderful. And people don't hire you to be nicer to their employees. People don't hire you to be better liked. People hire you because they want to build their businesses, make more money, be more profitable, and they want those things. That's why people spend the money to bring you in. But then you talk about these things. How does that correlate?
Well, when you think about it, if a company is not run with people who are committed and fully engaged and feel valued, it's not going to go very far. They go hand in hand. Um, if you're not counting people as important as your most important asset in your business, then you might do well for the short term, but you're going to be churning over people. They're not going to want to stay and work where they aren't valued and appreciated. Some might do it for the money, but for the most part, people want to be involved on a personal level with something that's fulfilling with them for them, but also on a larger level. What does this company stand for? What are we trying to accomplish in the world? And so it's really important to know what matters to people when you bring them on board if you really want to get the most from their effort and commitment over time.
It reduces turnover, commitment. People will work harder for you without having to be told to. They'll care about the company. They'll care about the brand. They'll be ambassadors. So that was, of course, a leading question because we know that the skills that you bring affect all of that. So where do you start when you walk in? You do assessments and things like that. Where do you start to figure out where the low hanging fruit in an organization is to help them up level?
You know, it's interesting, Mark. I don't really personally do much in the way of going into organizations myself. I help folks that are using our tools to more effectively use them. And we have found over the years with working with so many organizations, top leadership needs to buy into the importance of people and modeling the right behaviors so that they're not pointing the finger and saying, okay, this is for you, but not for me.
Right.
It really is, it really does start at the top. So leaders who are willing to be open to learning new ways to improve themselves. Well, I'll give you a quick example. There was a fellow who was a manager of a hotel in the Northeast, and he was noticing not just turnover, but people calling in sick. You know, he was concerned about the lack of engagement. And so he brought in this consultant who used our tool to do a survey to find out what were people thinking and feeling. And to his dismay, he discovered a lot of the things were around him. People were unhappy with his management style. He tended to be a micromanager. He, would tell somebody to do something and then he couldn't let it go. He created this environment that was not conducive to people performing at their best. And so he took that information to heart. He worked with this consultant, and she was a coach too, to help identify what were some of the things that were getting in his way, and made conscious choices to do some things differently in how he interacted with people, how he delegated. And over time, it changed the whole culture, the whole atmosphere of that hotel. And this consultant who had not been in the building for a while, when she came in, she had people coming up to her, thanking her for having done this work where and this is the key, he was coachable, he was open. He did not try to excuse, justify, defend. He made public announcements to people. I've learned this about myself. I see that I am the problem in a lot of these areas, and I am committed to make changes. That sets a tone for the whole organization that is quite profound. And so I think that, and what was interesting there is his family life improved too, because he made these improvements and changes in the way he listened, in the way he talked to people, in the way he was present with them. And so those kind of changes can be dramatic when the top leader makes the commitment.
So great. So forgive me for being a little bit confused because you're so steeped in what it is your products do that it feels like you are a consultant because you just know this so deeply. So the question I have is, let's go back to what the consultant used. What did the consultant use to help this leader learn where he needs to work?
Sure. And by the way, my former life, before we were a software company, we were consultants. So I do have that hat that I've worn, just not as recently. We have a software tool called 2020 Insight that we created back in the early 90s because we wanted a customizable 360-degree feedback tool for leaders, and one did not exist. We want to be able to change the questions based on the different organizations. So we created that, released it in 1994, and then made the decision, we're now a software company. And so we pursued that, and we are still going strong with that. So that's the tool that she used. It can be used to assess a person, a team, or an entire organization.
Yeah, I do a 360 with every executive that I work with, but I write it on a piece of paper. I don't have a, like, so you and I are going to be talking about that. How can I make this a little more formal and a little more customizable to what I do? But once someone gets that assessment, once that, and again, a 360 review is where you interview several of the people in the orbit of the person who needs to be coached. And then they give that feedback. So a person who compiles that feedback needs to really have both the science and the art of what to take, what to keep, what to throw away, and then what and how to bring it to that person so that they can hear the insights that they need to hear.
And ours is automated in that it's like an online survey that the respondents complete. And then the program where you do the individual interviews, ours is going out automated where they can give a numeric rating for the person, how well they do certain things, as well as enter comments. So they get quantitative and qualitative information. And then in their reports, they're able to compare their self score to the scores that others have given them. And this is all anonymous, except for the boss. The person's manager obviously is one person, so they can see, because it's broken out by the relationships. Sure. So the feedback from the manager, the peers, direct reports, and any other people they may have gotten input from. So the consultant is able to sit down with the person to help them look at, where are your blind spots? And this is interesting because sometimes the blind spots are where the person rated themselves high and others said, oh, no, you're not so good there. But other times it's the opposite, where someone is very hard on themselves and rate themselves low, and others are saying, hey, this is a strength for you. So there's, interesting learnings on both sides of the spectrum, but typically the ones that cause the most alarm or dismay are the ones where somebody thought, hey, I'm flying high here, and others are saying, oh, no, you're not.
It is an interesting thing for me personally. When I get one of those assessments, I was in an organization where we had assessments. Everybody assessed me. I assessed myself. We added everything up, and it was my scores who brought me down. If I had just mimicked what other people's scores were, I actually would have been at the top of the game, and I brought myself down. Like, what does that tell me about me and how and how I think about myself? So tell me so where do you go with this? Like, so it comes from the top. Now, how about peer-to-peer and in team building? Where do you influence?
Well, let me just say this. The most powerful thing a leader can do with that feedback is sit down with the people who gave the feedback and share what they learned from it and what they're making a commitment to do. Otherwise, it's just an exercise. It's like going to a day-long workshop and then you leave and nothing happens. So in this case, the leader can say, here's what you identified as my strengths, and I'm going to continue working to develop and leverage them. Here are areas where you found, there were some issues. And honestly, I get this one, but I'm not clear at all on what the problem is with this other one. And so making it safe for people to open up and say, I'm not trying to point fingers and find out who said what, but I would really appreciate any additional insights any of you would be willing to share with me on where am I doing this that's causing a problem, so that they can get more information. And it helps, unless that individual is very skilled at facilitation, both content and process, it's really better to have a facilitator in the room with them, because human nature is, if people do start sharing, here's what you're doing that's causing a problem for me, there's a tendency to want to justify, explain, and defend behavior instead of sitting back and openly accepting it and saying, oh, that's interesting, tell me more. So if that person is self-aware enough, they could facilitate as well. But sometimes it's helpful to have another person in there, because what you want to do ultimately is have a plan for making improvements. And we recommend just one area of focus. High achievers like to take on lots of challenges and lots of developmental goals. But honestly, if they focus on one thing at a time, that allows the brain to get rewired as they practice that new behavior and learn that. And that ends up having a ripple effect on other things that they do.
The 360 report is the best coaching roadmap. It's almost like a cheat sheet, for me as a coach to go in and figure out, where do we start? What do we work on? What skills do we need to deal with? What emotional intelligence needs to be shored up? And it's just invaluable. And it changes the whole organization.
And you could also set up a team of people for the team members to rate. So instead of rating individually, they're rating the team. How well do we communicate? How well do we share resources? So they identify as a group where they need to make improvements.
So Meredith, I want to go into your book, because I'm really loving the way it's organized and how simple it is for people to understand how they can raise their skills, especially through these 360 assessments. And once they learn these things, the top 10 relationship building skills that you put in the book: listen to understand, coach people to think for themselves, guide learning from experience, get buy-in for expectations, which is critical. Most people don't do that. Offer encouragement, express appreciation, give feedback constructively, accept feedback graciously, engage in dialogue, and resolve conflict creatively, which, by the way, I'll put these in the show notes. Where do you start with these? Listen to understand. I think listening, one of the things that you're really good at is listening, because when I started the show with how important I feel and how seen I feel, talk about listening as a leadership skill.
Listening is the foundation skill for all the others. It's hard for me to state how important that skill is in life. For leaders, it's probably the most important thing you can do to help people feel valued and appreciated. Because so many people are used to being talked to or having people take turns speaking, but to have someone really be focused on you, to help you, to convey to you through their body language, their eyes, that you are the most important person in my world at this moment. That's huge, because hardly anybody ever does that. And then when you can stop the chatter in your own head, so you can really focus on what this person is saying, and your whole purpose is to really get them to understand, what are they trying to tell me? Their words are saying one thing, but their facial expression, their body language is saying something else. So to not assume or believe only the words, look at the whole package. And then ask questions. Listening is not just sitting silently while somebody else talks. It should be interactive so that you are engaged. So you could even say, hey, let me stop you just a second. I want to check something you just said to make sure I've got it right. That's letting the person know, hey, they're really paying attention to what I'm saying. And then to be able to rephrase it, not to repeat it back verbatim, because that's not helpful. People will wonder, did she really get it, or is she just, good at memorizing what I said? But to put it in your own words and then follow up with a question that goes deeper to really get at the why, what's behind what they're saying, what do they really need, or what do they really want? it's huge.
Well, I do this with the leaders that I coach. I have them, one of their assignments during our coaching together is to, in a week, to go find 5 people in their organization, take them to lunch or coffee and learn about them. You do not talk about business. You learn everything about them and then come back and report back to me what you've learned. And every single one of them is like, really, is there anything else I can do? Like, can I go lose 10 pounds? Like, make 5 phone cold calls. And every single one comes back profoundly changed, profoundly moved by what they found about people they only known, on a surface level. It's pretty amazing. But I like what you just said. Listening is the foundation. So that cascades down to the other 10. So when you're listening, when you're listening, what are you listening for? And then how do you use that going forward in the other 10 things?
Well, part of it is the context. What's the purpose of having this conversation? Let's take an example of an area where a lot of people have problems, and that's with receiving constructive feedback. And we use the word graciously in the chapter because so few people do that. Anytime someone comes to us and starts to launch into what we feel is an attack, whether it's intended that way or not, but they're telling us something we said or did that caused a problem for them, our immediate response is typically to justify it, defend it, explain it, put it back on them, blame somebody else. Whereas if we're listening closely to what they're saying, we can let go of all of that and just be fully listening for, what is this person needing from me? Where did I fall short? Instead of looking at who to point the finger at. And so that to me is an example of where listening is the skill that needs to kick in right away if somebody comes to you with a complaint or feedback about the way something happened. And in conjunction with listening is being willing to thank them and say, I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. I had no idea I was doing that. And if it's appropriate, apologize. Too often leaders feel that they will look weak and be less respected if they admit they did something wrong and they apologize. But the truth is, people will respect you more because they already know, you're human, you're fallible, you're not perfect, you do make mistakes. And so to own it immediately and say, I apologize for creating that situation. And then to ask, what can I do to make it right? Because we may assume we know what they want from us, but we could be wrong. And this is where listening comes in again, because to ask whatever version of that question is, what would you like me to do now? Or how can I, correct this? Or what would you like to see going forward? To get their input and then listen and decide, am I willing to commit to doing that or not? And if you are, then you make that commitment and you ask them to pay attention to your behavior in that area in the future and call you on it if they see you not following through. And that willingness to be human has a couple of important things that happen. One is the other person is relieved. For one thing, they had to muster up the courage. You don't even know how many times they practiced that in their head before they came to you, most likely, right?
Right. Relieved and validated also.
Yes, exactly. So it was safe for them to do that. So they're more likely to come back to you in the future if something else happens that needs to be addressed. And you've given them permission to watch and see if you really walk your talk. And that helps them. So it builds the relationship. It creates a depth of connection there that would totally not happen if you pushed them back and you pushed away, because they wouldn't come back to you in the future, most likely, if you did not welcome that input.
It's it's a two-edged sword, because it's a skill to be able to be vulnerable, to invite the criticism, to invite the feedback, but also to not turn into I know one CEO that I work with often feels beat up by his team when he allows them to give them the feedback. So, his own inner child needs a little soothing and he needs a little shoring up because, again, it could turn into a pile-on. So it takes a skill to be able to both hold your leadership and be vulnerable at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think having one-on-one conversations is a good way to start if you haven't had those in the past. And, just asking the simple question, and I bet you do this with your coaching clients, what's one thing I could do better that would make your experience here in this company better for you?
Mm.
What's one thing I could do differently? So you're not asking for these mega changes. You're just trying to identify one thing that's getting in their way of being as productive as they might be.
Nice.
And then it sometimes can be something so simple that, of course, it's easy to do. But if you don't know it, you don't know that that's what they need.
Right. So there's one more I want to talk to you about because it's near and dear to my heart. And that is buy-in for expectations. We were just talking about feedback and complaints. And my friend who I've introduced you to, Helen Appleby, says that complaints are basically unmet expectations. So we need to get them out on the table. I teach agreements versus expectations, have agreements. And you're talking about buy-in for these expectations. Why is that so important?
Well, adults don't like to be treated as children. A lot of times children don't like to be treated as children, meaning they don't like to be ordered around. You're going to do this, you're going to do that. Here's what I need by 3:00 on Friday. Whereas if we sit down with people, and we actually quoted Dusan Jukic's book, where he has the chapter on agreements, because we agree that getting agreement is really the adult to adult thing to do.
That book is straight line leadership, right?
Straight line leadership. Mm-hmm. Yep. And so this whole idea of you've got something that needs to be done. So you have different ways of communicating that with this other person. And it's so much better if you can sit down with them and outline, okay, here's what needs to be done. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think this is a realistic time frame? What resources do you need to find out what will help them achieve this project, this goal, this expectation that you have regarding their performance in a particular area? So talking to them and finding out their why, what would cause them to be excited about this or be enthusiastic about this? That's where the buy-in comes in, because they've had input. They haven't been ordered to do it. They've had the opportunity to talk about, here's what I think would make this better. Here's where I think we ought to call this person and not that person. Here's who I think needs to be on the team. Getting their involvement gets them to commit more strongly to the whole process and the result. And then getting them to make that commitment. Yes, I can deliver this by Friday at 3:00. And so that way you can check back with them, knowing the two of you have agreed on this. It's not just a one-way thing.
It totally creates relationship and partnership in everything that you're doing. And it also sets you up that if you're not going to meet that agreement, you can revisit it and say, I agreed to do this. I either need these resources or we need to change the date or something like that. So it gives you a basis for ongoing conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because to know in advance if somebody's going to have issues, and this is where, we need to look at people who work with us as human beings. They may have some things going on in their personal lives that are going to get in the way. It has nothing to do with their motivation at work, but there may be something going on at home that causes them to say, I can't meet that deadline. And so you look at, all right, who else do I need to bring in? It allows you as the leader to evaluate, all right, if that really is the deadline I need, what adjustments do I need to make? And get that person's input on how can we make sure this happens given these circumstances.
This year of COVID, I think, was a crash course in I have to treat my people like people. It was just, it was unignorable, if that's a word, because people were dealing with so much that the leaders had to learn empathy fast if they were going to hold their teams together, if they were going to keep things moving. They had to learn how to help. And I think it really moved a lot forward. It was a lot of devastation this past year. But I think a lot has shifted. Would you agree?
I definitely agree, because people had so much they had to contend with, working from home, having kids at home. There were just so many elements that were introduced there. And I think the most effective leaders did, in fact, have these important conversations with their folks, asking them, what's going on? What do you need? What kind of adjustments do we need to make in terms of your work hours? So the leaders who demonstrated, as you said, the empathy, trying to put themselves in the other person's shoes and understand their situation, so they had that flexibility that allowed people to perform at their best around the circumstances they were dealing with. I think that was huge.
So the podcast is Strong for Performance. The book is Connect with Your Team. Where can people find you if they just have to have more of you?
Well, I am on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, Meredith M. Bell. And then our website is growstrongleaders.com. And we do have a special page, growstrongleaders.com/free, where they can download an ebook about listening called Listen Like a Pro, which is basically an excerpt of our chapter from the book. So they can get a taste of the book through that ebook.
Oh, that's outstanding. And who's your ideal customer?
Well, we actually have two. We have coaches and consultants who use our products within the services they provide to their clients. And then we also have organizations, usually under the umbrella of human resources. So it might be someone in charge of learning and development or leadership development or OD. So those folks are looking for tools, and now our books too, to help with improving the way people interact with each other at work.
Meredith, I love what you bring to the world. I thank you for sharing with us and coming into my life.
Thank you, Mark. I feel the same way.
We're going to put all those links in the show notes so you can get the free stuff. You can follow Meredith. She puts great videos and great content out on social media, so you can get a PhD in communications just by following her. Again, Meredith, thank you for being here. To everybody else, I love you a ton. I appreciate your time and attention. Have a great rest of the day.